From his first 4 small crops, he was the #2 sire in North America and Europe on apex figures, splitting Galileo and Warfront. He just looks the part. He exudes class. He looks like Northern Dancer. I mean, it's impossible to get better than that. When you know a horse is this good, you have to be able to push the chips out on the table and to play that hand. He's a superstar.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the final edition of Spa Babies, presented by Spendthrift, the Breeders' Farm. I'm Dan Illman, along with Nicole Russo. It's sad that it's the last Spa Babies of this summer, but we're going to leave with a bang, because let's take a look at the field for the Grade 1 hopeful. It is the featured race for 2-year-olds at Saratoga this summer. 7 furlongs, 4 obviously the males on the dirt. Our friends at Spendthrift, represented by the #1 Shoplifted by their star stallion, that being Into Mischief. Let's start with Shoplifted, who is one of 3 in the field, trained by Steve Asmussen. He seems to have this field completely surrounded, and Shoplifted was a very good-looking debut winner.
Yeah, he was won by 4.5 lengths on debut for Steve Asmussen, who's had a terrific Saratoga meeting. We often talk about how those horses can often move forward second time out from his barn. So you certainly have to like that Shoplifted was dominant on debut. The runner-up from his debut, Kowalski, actually runs back on Saturday, a few hours after we're filming this. Third place Complexifier came back to be a good second, and a strong Traverse Day maiden. You've got Into Mischief here over a terrific female family. You see names like Miss Shop, Trap Shot. There's a lot of speed, some juvenile ability in the family. There's a lot to like about Shoplifted, who sold for $800,000 earlier this year, by the way, so he's always been well regarded.
Very professional debut at odds on. He draws an inside post position. That can be tricky for these inexperienced babies. He'll have to work out a trip under Joel Rosario. The #2 is American Butterfly. We talk about Asmussen's prowess with second-time starters. Well, Mr. Lucas isn't too bad himself with second-time runners. An American Butterfly, with the addition of Lasix, really improved by leaps and bounds, winning with a 71 Beyer speed figure. This one from the first crop of the great American Pharaoh.
Yeah, gosh, we've talked a lot and we've seen a lot this summer from, I think, a very deep class of freshman sires, a couple represented in here in the hopeful with a chance to end the summer season with a bang. Triple Crown winner American Pharaoh at the head of the class, your leading freshman sire right now. We've talked a lot about how a lot of his stakes performers have excelled on turf early. That certainly doesn't mean that they won't run on dirt, but I am wondering if turf could be in the future for American Butterfly, who is out of a Warfront mare. This one was 7th in the maiden, won by Basin, who we'll get to a bit later in this hopeful field, then came back to win by 2.5 lengths last out, taking that step forward typical of a Lucas horse. With the 71 Beyer you mentioned, he'd have to move forward again to get the top prize here.
The #3 Green Light Go is one of the early gatekeepers of this division on the East Coast, a perfect 2 for 2, winner of the Grade 2 Saratoga Special. He has earned stereo 84 Beyer speed figures in both of his lifetime outings. He can win from on the lead. He can win from off the pace. He is a stout-bodied sort, and he is going to be a handful for these horses stepping up in class.
Yeah, and you know, he won both his starts, including the Saratoga Special. The runner-up in his debut, Another Miracle, came back to win the Stillwater. He's a beautiful mover over this track. I was in Saratoga for his win in the Special, and I really love the way he gets over the Saratoga track. He fired a bullet in his final move for this, very similar to what he did before the Special. And being by Hardspun, who, as we've discussed, his best progeny run well longer, I don't think he'll mind stepping up to the 7 furlongs, which every horse in this field is running for the first time.
The number 4 is Gozilla, the second of the Asmussen trio. This flatter colt trampled his field in his debut by showing brilliant early speed. He quickly got clear, opened up under a very confident Ricardo Santana, who was just peeking back from basically the 5/16 pole to the wire, and won with the greatest of ease. Now, he might have to go a little bit faster in the early portion of this race. Our friends at Timeform believe he can make the lead, however. This horse attracts Santana. I guess he had his choice of the 3. He goes with Gozilla.
Yeah, I did think that was encouraging that Santana was sticking with this one, with Rosario picking up Shoplifted. This one does have to go a little bit farther. He's going to have some company on the front end early, probably. But, there is plenty of route ability in his female family, although on the turf, I see Icy Atlantic, Wild Promises, and others in this family.
Green Light Go, the 3 is 2 for 2 in his career with a graded win, as is the 5. By Your Side, a $240,000 yearling by the red-hot first-crop sire, Constitution. And like Green Light Go, this horse has shown the ability to sit off of the pace as well as push the pace. A nice post position near the outside for Arad Ortiz and trainer Eddie Keneally. And this horse seems to have still a little bit of upside.
Yeah, and I think Eddie Keneally's been patient with him. This horse beat Basin by a nose in his debut. Basin, who obviously came back to win next out, then won the Sanford. He's been idle since, with Keneally just taking his time waiting for this. As you mentioned, the first crop for another red-hot freshman sire in Constitution, who's right up there at the top of the list with American Pharoah. He has graded winners on both coasts this summer at Saratoga and Del Mar, and this would really put the exclamation point on his summer.
Perhaps the 6, Inside Risk, a prescient claim for trainer Tom Morley, who took this one from Todd Pletcher's barn out of a winning debut for a $50,000 tag. This horse is going to have to improve from a buyer's speed figure standpoint, but he is getting blinkers, and if the pace heats up, perhaps he can pick up some pieces. I think this hopeful is going to be a bit tough for Inside Risk, but maybe he will continue to improve with added distance and experience down the road.
Yeah, I think it could prove an astute claim for the Morley barn, but he is stepping way up in class, obviously, and you have to wonder why Pletcher had him in there for the tag to begin with. That said, he is adding blinkers. I think that could get him, a bit more involved as he moves from 5.5 furlongs to 7 furlongs. And he's by Street Sense, whose progeny run very well on wet tracks. With looking at the early weather forecast for Monday's closing day card, a wet track is not out of the realm of possibility, and that would move Inside Risk up.
The fellow with the best buyer speed figure in the field is on the outside. Number 7, Basin, also trained by Asmussen, 86 buyer speed figure victory in start number 2 at Saratoga. This horse showed improved early speed, got a little bit green, I noticed, when he made the front. A lot of these 2-year-olds will do so when they get to the lead and they hear the crowd start to roar, especially at Saratoga. He swapped leads a couple of times, but quickly righted the ship. It was a nice, professional enough performance, and I think Basin from this outside post will sit a good stalking trip, and if he improves off that last buyer, in some ways, he's the horse to beat.
Yeah, as you mentioned, the top buyer in this field so far, although a couple others are right behind him in those mid-80s. Another freshman sire represented here, the first crop of Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile winner Liam's Map. The Liam's Maps, I think they're going to take a little bit of time to mature. He was at his best as an older horse. I think we're seeing Basin continue to mature. You mentioned that he was a little green last time, but I do think the 7 furlong distance should hit them right behind the eyes. I think these horses are ultimately going to be at their best from 7 furlongs to a mile and an eighth or so. Ricardo Santana, we mentioned him having his pick of the Asmussen horses. Well, all Basin picks up is Saratoga's leading rider, Jose Ortiz, so I think he's going to be just fine.
Well, it's pick time for the final Spa Baby race this summer, the Grade 1 hopeful. Who do you like?
I'm going to go with Green Light Go, even though that's a chalky pick. I just can't get out of my head the way I thought he moved over this track, the way he seems to be training up to another solid performance. I think he'll relish that little bit of extra distance, which might be the key here. of the Asmussen trio, I like Gozilla the best. He's really going to have to take a step forward and not bounce off that strong debut, but befitting his name, he just ran like a monster. And if I was going to use a price horse in here, it would be American Butterfly. As I said, he's going to have to take a step forward from his buyer standpoint, but Wayne Lucas has won 8 hopefuls. And hey, the first crop of a Triple Crown winner. I mean, we talk all the time about how the hopeful stakes closing day of Saratoga, the name says it all. So, I mean, why not take a shot with American Pharoah, who's so hot right now, as my price horse?
If it's good enough for Santana, it's good enough for me. I'm going to go with the 4, Gozilla. I love the speed he showed in his debut. He really just showed that field his heels under virtually only hands and heels urging. I'm curious to see if there's more in the tank as he tries 7 and winners for the first time. He'll be my top selection. Basin, I think, is going to run very well. Your top pick, Green Light Go, figures in the mix. I'm going 4, 7, 3, and 1 in the Grade 1 Hopeful. It is the signature race for 2-year-olds on the East Coast at Saratoga this season. Best of luck.